Hey guys, it's Chris Matakis, and so many people do not fulfill their potential on or off the mats, and I don't want you to be one of them. That's why we created this channel. I'm a Jiu Jitsu black belt, a school owner. I've written 13 books about using Jiu Jitsu as a vehicle for personal development, and more than any of that, I've had the privilege to train with the best guys in the world. And we're going to talk about the lessons I've learned from each of them. Today, we're going to focus on Garry Tonon, the most exciting grappler in the history of the world. And here are 4 big lessons I've learned with my time with Garry. So above all, this dude would get submitted in the training room more than any of us, even though he was the best of us. And then he would go out in a tournament and compete flawlessly and win a world championship. And this is something that kind of like drilled itself into my brain from the beginning. Like every training session, Garry would get submitted 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Everyone else would get submitted like once or twice, but then we would go into a tournament and we would do pretty well, but Garry would win every single time. And I recognize he was just always willing to put himself in the most difficult positions and voluntarily risk failing in the training room so he would not fail in competition. And when you get to the point where this is something Garry did from like white belt up, and I remember specifically when he won the brown belt world championship, it was such a huge day for him and his own evolution. And I remember that week where like 3 days prior in training, I watched him get submitted multiple times against guys not nearly as skilled as the guys he'd be competing against. And then he goes into the competition against the best guys in the world and makes them all look foolish. And that just left the lesson for me of like, yo, the training room is the training room. And the ones that are the most successful in competition are the ones that train properly, purposefully. And Garry was always putting himself in the most difficult situations possible in training. So if he ever ended up there in a tournament, say like that armbar with Kron Gracie in ADCC, he'd always find his way out. And there was a humility embedded in that that I continually reference and learn from to this day. So the second one with Garry, let's scroll down this list here. All right. Quantity has a quality all its own. So from a period of like 2008 to 2014 or so, in my own training, I was training like multiple times a day, every day. And my average weeks would end up being something like 12 to 16, 17 training sessions a week, which was a ton of volume. I was training more than anyone I knew except Garry. Amazingly, Garry would literally train all day. And if he wasn't training, he was in the car driving to the next training. And it's something where, you know, we hear this 10,000 hour rule that it takes 10,000 hours to master something, but more purposefully, it takes 10,000 hours of concentrated effort and purposeful practice to master something. Garry legitimately accumulated those hours. He trained more than any of us, and he never lost sight of the purpose of training. He was always drilling while everyone else was doing randori. He was always specifically working on something. He didn't waste days. And I think that's a lesson we can take far beyond the mats of, you know, we only get so many days. We only get so much training time. We only get so many dinners out with our parents or walks in a park with our wives. Make the most of it. And Garry always made the most of every single training session and never let a single one slide by without making progress. And he did that literally all day, every day. And then the third part was the sacrifice he made to do so. Like this was a time when the tolls in New York City and the gas to New York City cost us a lot of money. And this dude made that sacrifice. But I was more impressed not just with the financial sacrifices he made, but with the time investments he made. He would go from training at Brunswick Jiu Jitsu at like 6 in the morning, and then he would meet me at Professor Almeida's, and we would train before the MMA practice. He would do the full MMA practice. Then he would drive to Tom's to get training in. Then he might head to Henzo's for an evening class. This dude literally went all over New Jersey and New York, up and down the turnpike for his training. And most days he would train in 2, 3, 4 different locations because it was the best training he could get. And he never complained about it once. It was a sacrifice he consciously made, and results showed. And then finally, if you know Garry, you know he is authentically himself. There are no other Garry Tonons, from the Garry Tonon diet to his ridiculous and wonderful haircuts and mustaches to the way he communicates with the world on Instagram. Like, it's all deeply, authentically Garry. And Carl Jung had this idea: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I believe Garry has done that. He has unapologetically been himself. And that's why he is one of the most popular grapplers of all time. And that's why you can't help but root for him, because you see this dude just go out there and put it all on the line every single time, heart on his sleeve, with reckless abandon. And it creates the most beautiful jiu-jitsu you'll ever see. So I've had the privilege to train with Garry since like 2008. And to see his progression, it was useful for me because you hear all the things you're supposed to do, right? You hear the pithy phrase, you see the Instagram highlights, and you see the Rocky montage. But to see someone live that for well over a decade and then see the fruits of their labor that come really far downstream from that, it's been a great reminder for all of us within his immediate and distant circles, just that like you can have anything if you're willing to put in the purposeful time, if you're willing to make the sacrifices, if you're going to be unapologetically yourself, and if you're willing to fail. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned from Garry that I've tried to apply beyond the mats too is like, yo, play the role of the fool. Put yourself in the worst position possible where you're not strong and find strength along the way as you get out. I've seen this dude do this in every position he was working on, in every submission escape he was working on. And now we're all trying to apply that beyond the mat as well. And if we're going to master anything, we have to be willing to be the fool first. And people just aren't willing to do that, especially when the eyes of people whose opinion you value are watching you. We're hesitant to go make mistakes. But Garry has shown me time and time again the strength of voluntarily doing the thing you're not great at, that you're weak at, to acquire strength. And he has literally become the most exciting grappler in the history of jiu-jitsu because of that. So these are some lessons I've taken away from Garry. To sum it up for everybody, if you could derive wisdom from Garry Tonon, it would be: it's about volume, it's about sacrifice, it's about the purposeful pursuit of failure, and it's about being your most authentic self. And if we do that, we can't not succeed. So I wish you well. I hope you apply these lessons, and I'll talk to you very soon. If you like this, subscribe, comment, hit me up, and we'll continue to learn and grow together. Thanks, guys. Be well.